Welcome to Now Playing Podcast Book Reviews. From fiction to nonfiction, graphic novels, and more, we're here to help you find something great to read. We hope you enjoy the show.
Welcome to Now Playing Book Review. I am your co-host, Stuart.
And this is Jacob.
And we're here to talk about Twilight. Not the movies. We're doing that over as a silver level donation on Fridays. But because they were a book sensation first, in fact, all 4 books were published before there ever was a movie, we wanted to start there. And so we've reached book 3 in the Twilight series, Eclipse, which, Jacob, I have to admit, if New Moon was about, new dude on the scene, I thought Eclipse was going to be about how Jacob might have eclipsed the popularity of Edward with Bella, but that's not the case.
Well, yeah, I'm trying to think of, there's 2 kinds of eclipse, a lunar and a solar eclipse. So who's covering who here? Is Jacob covering Edward or vice versa?
I don't know. When I read this book, it mostly felt like Bella's feelings remained for the vampire. Yes, really late in the game, the needle moves a tad and she'll be like, Jacob, I need you, which is not the same thing as saying I love you. Or I want you more than a vampire. But she at least acknowledges there's an emotional attachment with Jacob. But at no point do I feel like this werewolf boy has a shot. My heart still bleeds for the guy.
Yeah, this one gets real weird for me, especially towards the end where we get, I guess it's not quite a threesome, but a really weird thing going on in a tent where all these feelings come out.
I wish it had been a threesome. Is that kinky of me? But I really do wish that this was more erotica than it is. I feel like it's very chaste. At the end of the day, Jacob kisses her and it's a big deal. She punches him and breaks her hand and he has to apologize and wait to be asked and all of that. It's very much, I guess, when you think about the literary traditions, social cues and customs and such, it is like that 19th century literature stuff, that Jane Austen, the Bronte sister stuff, where, it just was a different era of social propriety. And instead of it being about class, it's about being species, werewolf, vampire, human. Interesting thing, too, Jacob makes the pitch that he is human. At the end of the day, you go with him because you are not having to become anything else. He's flesh and blood. He's warm. At least it has a warm body temperature at that. But I feel like in the end of the day, he has no pause to stand on here. He gets one snuggle in a tent, as you say, on a cold night. And her parting thought is that, she always wanted a dog, but her mom was allergic. Ouch. That just hurts.
It's bizarre because that last book, New Moon, we talked about the whole issue where there was the girl Emily whose face got mauled because a guy wolfed out in front of her and lost control. And yet this one, Bella, when she does kiss Jacob, she's like, I like it because it feels safe. I'm not going to be hurt. But you just told us, in the last book, this is still a danger too. I don't know. I guess it's just a silly teenage girl still trying to decide between 2 guys, and that's never going to go away with these books.
Yeah, to break down the code, it's true of 19th century literature, it's true of this. It's all about the fears of sex, right? I'm afraid of getting intimate, there's dangers associated with it, so we have to code that in language, and it's the fact that they're vampires and werewolves that make these people threatening. But truly, it's the fact of having a personal relationship or a carnal relationship that's the threat.
Yeah, but what's weird is that, Bella doesn't seem to care about that threat. There's going to be a whole discussion about having sex with Edward and marriage and she wants to have sex with him before she's turned to a vamp because she's turned on by that danger or something. There's some real weird subtext going on.
Yeah, she is definitely exploring her sexuality here in what is the biggest book yet. I just want to put it out there that this one is 629 pages in my edition and doesn't need to be. I also want to just put it out there. Who killed the editor? Because this feels like it's as big as almost any Harry Potter book that I read, and not much really happens for the first 500 pages.
It's funny you say that, Stuart, because I have not rewatched this movie yet. I've seen it once years ago, but I remember it being my least favorite movie. It's what I would call the flashback movie. I didn't even remember what the conflict was in it. I just remember we're going to get this vampire's backstory and this vampire's backstory. And yeah, that comes from the book. And yet my favorite read so far, even though it's longer, I guess, here's the thing, like Stephenie Meyer, not a great writer. This one though, like, because she sets up elements of like a serial killer going on in Seattle, there's just enough, like someone goes through Bella's room and there's enough mysteries going on throughout that it kind of hooked me and kept me going. But I agree, like, yeah, you could edit all this down. I don't know if we need all these backstories. Like, does Rosalie become a better character because you know her backstory now? I don't know. I guess that's what we're here to discuss.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right. This is a middle chapter. She knows where the ending is going to be. She already kind of wrote Breaking Dawn in her head earlier. So it's got that unfortunate position of being neither the beginning of the story nor the ending of the story. We're caught there in the middle, and it's really a time for Meyer to dig into, supporting characters that maybe we didn't care about or weren't paying attention to, and finding out their backstory. Before we do that, though, I just always have to point out the cover and how I never understand why. Like, I got the apple a little bit, but tell me why there's a ribbon, red ribbon breaking into two on the cover. I assume it speaks to fraying and, snapping, a breaking point. Things are going to reach a climax here, but it feels like the photographer didn't read the book and just said, I'm doing my own thing.
Yeah, according to Stephenie Meyer and the publisher, this is about Bella having to break that tie of friendship with Jacob to go with Edward, to make that final decision, and also represents her breaking that tie from humanity, or wanting to break that tie. That's why you got this ribbon that's being torn.
Very abstract. But,
yes.
I mean, I guess it's, that's not necessarily a bad thing to go. Now they can put the posters for the movies. This was before there were actors attached to the roles. What could you sell this as? Again, I thought this was going to be the Jacob story. And the backstory we get is really for his whole tribe. That he ends up bringing Bella to one of their council meetings. And we get like 10 pages of lore that I had to reread twice just to soak it up. But here it is in a nutshell, I think, is that he comes from a magical people, the Quaaludes. I guess that's how you might say it. Quaaludes. They were magic before they were werewolves. They could make wind that was screaming. They could talk to animals. And it really came down to this battle between the spirit chief and one of his disciples, who was like, let's use magic to conquer other people. That other guy, the betrayer, was called Utalpa. When the spirit chief was outside his body doing what spirit people do, wandering around the clouds, he jumped into that body and killed his body and basically left the chief stranded. And the only way back to his people was embodying a wolf. That was where it started. The chief basically said, I have to take the form of something, and best to be a wolf so I can come back and restore order to my tribe. And it just became a thing.
And this is a real tribe. Like, in real life, this is a real tribe of Native Americans. One of the things Stephenie Meyer did when she came up with, okay, I need a really cloudy place, she actually looked at maps to try to decide where to set Twilight when she's fully writing it, and she came upon Forks, and this tribe was really there, and she looked into, she's like, oh, they have these shape-shifting stories. I don't know if this is an exact translation of, their shape-shifting myths, but she has been accused of cultural appropriation for all this. You get this white Mormon lady, and Mormons already have a kind of interesting history with Native Americans. If you look into that, oh, hey, we have our own Bible and it's all about you guys and where you came from. And so, yeah, I know there's some criticism there, but yeah, a lot of this stuff is based on real lore. I'm sure she has made some stuff up, like the third wife and that. But yeah, you're going to get the backstory of where, because these aren't really werewolves. These aren't Howl at the Full Moon. This is, they're shapeshifters more. And I guess this tribe, they shapeshift into wolves when you're chosen to be a shapeshifter, because it's not everyone.
And thanks for pointing that out, because I did think that she just made all of this up. I didn't even know Forks was a real place. I thought it was like a fork in the road, like a metaphor place. But yeah, apparently you can go to the actual Forks, Washington, and there are Twilight tourist traps and stuff. I found out all about this this week. So yeah, props to her that she did research. And maybe some of this does reflect actual culture. I don't know about this imprinting thing, though. What we learn about, most importantly, when it comes to Jacob and Bella, I don't know if she says it outright, but basically Jacob, it's love at first sight for him, because in his culture, they imprint. They just all of a sudden realize in a moment, in a flash, you're the one for me. And that's how Sam ended up being with Emily and scarring up her face.
Yeah, even though he loved like another girl, he had to go with who you imprint on. Like, look, I'm trying to think back on my like 6th grade science class about imprinting with like baby ducks, and they got to see their mom first or else they'll think you're the mother. And I don't know why you introduced this. I don't think it ever really pays off, but I guess it's setting up an idea that Jacob will suddenly be able to get over Bella because he's going to imprint at some point. That's what I'm thinking as I'm reading through this. Like, what girl is he going to find then? It just seems like an easy out for this love triangle.
Oh, I had seen it the other way. I thought he had already imprinted on Bella, and there's just nothing he can do but because why else be in love with Bella? I'm just going to make that argument. She's really not that interesting. Not pretty, not interesting, like doesn't even go to his school. Like, why is he pining for this so hard? I thought it had to be imprinting. But, this stuff it got a little weird. I got to say, when we find out about his geeky friend Quill, who just came into it, like the last couple books, he was waiting for puberty to hit and to join this wolf tribe. And now that he has, he's imprinted on a 2-year-old?
Yeah.
Ooh-wee! I don't know why you go there with that. That just brings up all kind of cultural taboos, right? Like, he loves a baby and is waiting for the baby to grow up and marry him.
Yeah, they try to make it, oh no, it's not a sexual thing. It will turn into one when this baby is old enough, but
it will be age appropriate when it gets there. But it's the casting of fate and destiny. Yeah, they've sort of put this weird pall on sexual predator. Like, it just kind of gross an adult lusting for a baby is never cool.
And again, they try to go out of their way to not make it sound lustful, but like, you are in love with that person. You are willing to devote your entire life to that person. Like, it plays a little weird. And I don't know, maybe we'll find out Jacob did imprint. It's never called out in this one. Jacob gets real weird now. Like, I was Team Jacob in the last one. Now he's kind of like this weird, if you've heard of the phrase nice guy, like, I'm a nice guy. Why don't you like me? I'm a nice guy. Like, I feel like he's doing that throughout this. And he's like, look, I'm just going to pursue you. I don't care if you love Edward. Edward loves you. I'm just going to pursue you this whole time, no matter what.
Yeah, I agree. I'm less Team Jacob than I was last time. I'm not sure what team I'm on at this point.
Exactly.
But before we leave the Native Americans, the other thing that came up is we have this origin for the wolves coming into the tribe. We don't quite have an origin for the cold ones, but they do talk about the first time they saw vampires. And it's twofer. I guess it was a man and woman couple. They kill the first one. The wolves tear it up and realize even after they've used their teeth to dismember the vampire, it's still moving around and alive, and they have to burn it. So it establishes the idea that they're these cold things that can only be defeated by fire. And then his woman comes in there being all, seductive and vampire woman-y. I guess this is going to be important because they spend a lot of time in the book underlying this. The chief tries to fight her, but he's old, and the only way that he's able to win is because his third wife kills herself, spills her blood in front of the vampire, and thus distracts her. Which makes me wonder, is this Bella's fate? Is Bella going to have to open up a vein in order to, I don't know, save Edward from some conflict?
Yeah, my reading is she's definitely going to have to open up a vein to save the day, but she's not going to die. We got a whole other book to go after this one.
Yeah, and more beyond that. But yes, one more in the 4-part saga, and then we're covering the other stuff, which sort of circles back and fills in gaps. But yeah, now we're starting to talk about vampire backstories, and you're right. 2 of the Cullen kids that I've barely paid attention to. We still know nothing about Emmett, but we do get backgrounds for Rosalie and Jasper, and I'm curious to know if you end up liking either better for knowing more of their history.
Jasper, yeah, he was the main reason, I guess, they left in the last book, because he couldn't control his hunger when Bella got that paper cut on her birthday. But I don't feel like that's a character I've ever really wondered about. But Rosalie, I do feel like throughout this, she's always the one, no, you shouldn't want to become a vampire. She's the one Cullen that's against all this, besides Edward. So Rosalie, I did want to know what her deal was, because her hatred for Bella, or dislike at least, has been a constant thing throughout the last 2 books.
Yeah, and I couldn't figure out whether it's, I don't want this girl joining my family, or I'm trying to warn a girl like me not to go down this path. She tells a cautionary tale, which I'm not exactly sure how relevant it is to Bella.
I mean, there's sexual assault in it, and
yes.
That seems like a deal with Bella going down that alley in the first book.
But in a different way, yeah. So let's explore this. So Rosalie Hale was her human identity, and she came from this middle-class family that was doing okay during the Great Depression. They were surviving as bankers, and they were social climbers, and they tried, because she was pretty, they thought, oh, the owner of the bank has a son, we can hook him up. Except Royce King is no prince, the man that she's engaged to. I can't follow this. Like, I get that people can be cruel and sadistic, but he agrees to marry her, and then a week before the wedding, he and a bunch of his friends from Atlanta decide to assault her in the street and leave her dead?
I mean, that's how it reads. And again, I don't read a lot of Victorian era literature, Jane Eyre and Jane Austen, all that stuff. Like, it kind of felt like it was tapping into that with these ideas of class and this woman trying to move up. Like, those seem vaguely familiar from when I read Charles Dickens, but
gang rape is never in those. I just want to say, and the idea that why get engaged? Like, if this was all just a game to you, or you're a cruel, sadistic person, now you're going to have to pretend that you're sad that your fiance is dead and all that. Like, why get serious about it? Like, I'd want to know his side of how this goes.
Well, and what's weird is, like, they call out her beauty, like, she's so beautiful. And again, like, okay, a trophy wife, then why do you sexually assault her and leave her for dead? Like, that, it's so bizarre. Like, I get it, rich banker's son, he's gonna have a beautiful wife and then probably cheat on her and ignore her, but, like, why go this route?
You would do this to the streetwalker, perhaps, but if she's pretty and someone you're publicly identified with and engaged to, I don't know why at the last second, in a drunken bit of fun with your friends, you decide to murder her. That just, it seemed over the top. It's felt both too dark for this book and unmotivated. Like, I'm like, I don't get that. And I don't know how it's relevant other than the fact that it sent Rosalie, she was saved. Carlisle came to her side. He couldn't save her life, but of course he turned her. And I remember from a previous book, the idea was that he was really thinking, you'll be perfect for Edward, who he had turned about 12 years before. Edward's not into it, but that was the thinking, is I'll bring you into the family so that you can partner up with my son. She instead goes on this murderous rampage. She goes back, puts on a wedding dress, and kills Royce King and all of his friends. That feels a lot to me like what's happening to Bella and Victoria. It made me wonder if we were supposed to be more sympathetic for the redheaded vampire who is hanging out in Seattle and waiting to come down and kill Bella.
Yeah, I don't know. I never had any sympathy for Victoria because of the story. And again, just trying to understand Rosalie. Okay, she never wanted to be a vamp. I don't think any of these people really wanted to. They were all on their deathbed when Carlisle turned them, but she seems to hold a real grudge because of that. She wanted a baby. She wanted that family. So she really wants that human life. And so I guess that's why she is jealous and also dislikes Bella, because Bella has that life she wanted, but she wants to throw it away and become a vampire.
It's even a little bit dishier because she basically says, you're homely. Like, you're not even good looking. I'm really pretty, and Edward never wanted me. And he's been around lots of pretty girls, and all of a sudden you come in and wafting your smell, and he can't get enough. I get the resentment, but like, that's what it really feels like it's about. It's not about that she got murdered or anything else. It's that this ugly girl thinks that she has more than what I have to offer.
Yeah, Edward turned her down, and yeah, it feels almost like the Jacob, Bella, Edward triangle, but with Rosalie here. Like, I don't even like him, but he turned me down for you, so I dislike you.
Yeah, I didn't have any more sympathy for Rosalie after hearing this than I did before. She seems like a problematic character that I wouldn't trust. So I'm wondering how she'll develop in the end, whether she'll die to help Edward and Bella come together or what, or how she'll put aside all of these grudges. I can't imagine.
So what about Jasper? Like, were you dying to know more about him? Like, does this backstory open up his character at all? Like, that he was a Confederate in the Civil War, a general?
Wait, hold up. So what I remember hearing, the only thing I remember hearing about him, he's the most recently turned. Which to me meant, oh, they did him in the last 20 years. He was a kid in the 60s, right?
Yeah, no, Civil War is the most recently turned.
Jasper Whitlock is a 17-year-old Confederate general who, yeah, again, he was recently turned by the Cullens. They found him in Philadelphia probably 20 years ago, but he, for a century, was caught up in wars. Not only the Civil War, but then we find out all of these vampire coven attacks.
And this is the stuff I like. That's why I say, like, oh, this is probably my favorite, because you just get all this weird lore and backstory of vampires, like, working their way through Mexico, having their own civil war. Like, I don't know. I wish the books were more about that than what we're getting.
Yeah, agreed. It feels like an entirely different book. Civil War and all of that stuff. A historical fiction novel was not what I thought I was reading. What seems relevant to me is that he is now an expert in how vampires can use newborns. And that word made me think, because Jacob, I think you've mentioned that somewhere in the movies it's coming, there's like a vampire baby.
Yes.
And like, I just imagine like little babies like with wings flying out of cribs and attacking people. I'm like, ooh, the newborns.
That's what I was thinking. Like, every time I saw that word, even though they make it clear, newborn just means someone that's been newly turned into a vampire. And I guess that's why you do have Jasper's stories, because throughout this novel, they're trying to say how dangerous these newborns are, because they can't control their thirst and they're wild and they'll just kill everything. And so that's, again, I guess we're supposed to sympathize with Jasper because he had to go through that struggle to be tamed.
You're never more dangerous or more strong than when you first get bit, because that's the point when you have so much rage and it's just all new. It basically means that you could physically take an old vampire, and there are vampires that calculate on that. It was a Civil War strategy. There were vampires, I think I mentioned some dude named Benito, who would go around turning people just so that they would then go and hurt his enemies and he could take down a coven. And that is what Victoria is also doing. She's up in Seattle. We don't know this. Again, everything's from Bella's perspective, so...
Yeah, we just think there's a serial killer in Seattle.
Yeah, we hear about news reports about all this death in Seattle, but in fact, it's Victoria creating newborns with the idea that if she has 20 people that turned in the last 365 days, that's going to be something that can overpower a vampire family of 7. So Jasper will be fighting back because he knows these war strategies. It's weird. I'll put it that way. I wish I had, I don't know, do I want more of his story or do I want it to be more integrated? It's difficult to say. I think what I am struggling with, for sure, is the decision to make everything told from Bella's point of view.
Yeah.
Because she has to be the focal point and because everyone loves her and all of that, it gets really exhausting having to always think about, well, what does Bella think? What does Bella do? What's Bella going to react to at this moment? Like, no, like, let's just spend some time with these other people and not worry about whether it relates to Bella or not.
Yeah, I so wish these were just written third person. I think they could be so much more interesting.
I really do. You know, I know she goes back and writes it from the Edward point of view, but I'm like, maybe that's a start, but I almost feel like you want to hear lots of points of view, particularly people like Jasper, who, again, has been sort of this cipher in the background, who now I realize has an interesting life, but I don't get enough of it to really care.
What's so interesting, maybe we'll get it in Breaking Dawn, but Emmett, like, no one cares about Emmett. What is his backstory? Did we ever get it? I feel like Esme's, Carlisle, like everyone but Emmett have got their backstory now.
Yeah, I guess his backstory is that he is runner-up to Edward, that Rosalie settled. She was like, well, if I can't have the one that everyone really wants, I'll go with this meathead. And so it's worth asking, you know, I've already asked, why does everyone love Bella? We'll just have to accept that she has a quality. You know, you imprint quickly, whether you're a werewolf or you smell it as a vampire, you just want it. Even though as a human, you may not recognize it. She drifts into the background as a human, but to the supernatural beast, she's irresistible. But why does she love Edward so much? When it comes down to it, she remains pretty devoted to him. I know he's got supermodel looks, and I know that he is really into her. I know that he's gaslighted her into thinking that, you know, she can't live without him. But is there something to like about Edward?
I honestly think, like, she is drawn to the power. She wants to be, like, it's not about being with Edward at this point, I think. Like, she just wants to be a vampire. She is going so hard. Like, this whole deal with Victoria returning with the newborn. She's like, look, great. You can turn me into a vamp now. You need me as a vampire to help. Like, I don't even think it's about Edward at this point. Or maybe that's just my reading, because I don't see why she is so in love with Edward. That's a failing of Stephenie Meyer's writing here. So I have to extrapolate and go, I don't know. She's always talking about that vampire power. So maybe that's what she really wants.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. It's about more than Edward to begin with. But even if it were about Edward and, first love and crush and all of that, you're not always rational. You think that this is the person you want to be with forever. It gets to this idea that he has, in this story, now asked a concession. We ended it with Bella saying, you got to turn me. The Volturi demand that I become a vampire, and I want to be with you forever. So he's like, sure, but we've got to get married first. I can't figure out whether that's a delaying tactic, because Bella reacts to that very poorly. She's like, I'm old enough to become a vampire, but I'm not old enough to get married yet.
I mean, the fact that she has been accepted to Dartmouth, but she might end up going to school in Juneau, Alaska to be with this guy. I mean, come on. I guess if you're an immortal vampire, you got forever to learn, but yeah, she's going to make some bad decisions for this guy.
Yeah, I agree. Depending on what she's going to study, maybe if she likes polar bears.
I don't know. Maybe Juneau, Alaska has a great college. I don't know. I didn't go there. I don't want to offend anyone that may have.
Right, exactly. All we can say is that she's been given opportunities that she's ignoring, and she's committed to Edward in a way that just feels underdeveloped. Frankly, particularly in light of the fact that there are every other guy as an option. But I guess Edward does sparkle. He is,
yes.
Again, never discount the physical allure that he might have.
But when you're freezing with hypothermia in the middle of the forest in winter because you're trying to lure out vampires, like, he's no good. He's cold. You got to give that 170-degree temperature Jacob in that tent to stay warm. Like, that is what I do find interesting is, like, they keep showing us reasons like, well, Edward's not always going to be able to help her in situations. Like, maybe he's not the best, but she wants to be with him no matter what, even when it's Jacob snuggling with her in that sleeping bag.
Again, I almost feel bad for Jacob that he thinks that, like, his body heat is going to give him the edge here. But, like, you're just a warm night in a tent. That's all you are to her. But, yeah, so let's just point out that all of this is building to a big battle that is happening in the background that for the 629 pages doesn't really start to get going until the last 100 pages. It's a lot of waiting.
Which I feel is like every Twilight book we've done. Like, nothing happens to that last 100 pages.
Agreed, but this one's longer. So the wait is even more difficult, I think. She's both waiting for the end of the school year because the deal was that once I've graduated, you're going to turn me. And then we're also waiting for whatever Victoria's doing. And again, we don't really know. It comes through in newspaper articles and implications, but there's very little to understand what threat she's facing.
Until you get a big data dump at the end.
Right. And that just seems like not a great way to build a thriller, which is, I guess, what I'm always hoping is an aspect of the story that is really not. Ultimately, it's about the romantic choices of Bella and very little about her life being in danger.
And that's why I grasp onto the little pieces, like when she goes into her room and things have been moved and they're trying to figure out who went into her room. Was it the Volturi? Was it Victoria? Yeah, I agree. Like, there's not enough of this stuff, but there's more than I've gotten before. So, like, that mystery, that all that stuff going on in the background is kind of pulling me through all this. We've heard all these arguments before, right? Like, these books are long and they've all been about, like, which way do I go? And here's another one.
Yeah, I feel like this is the one that make it most overt. Already I talked about how that for me this felt like virginity and like you're going to be the one to take me, but once I've lose my virginity, you're not going to want me. So we play this game of take me, don't take me, take me, don't take me. And now we have it made overt because it's about marriage. And like that's truly an argument about sex before marriage that happens, I would imagine, in Mormon culture.
Yes.
That's a discussion. So yeah, she's really made the argument very front and center in this one. And her attachment to Edward, it becomes comical because Edward wants to go down to the like battlegrounds and fight all these vampires that are coming. And she's like, but I want to be with you. And he's like, well, then I'll stay in a tent with you. Like, doesn't Stephenie Meyer know we'd rather be on the battlefield? Like, that's what's killing me about this book is that we spend our time away from the things we want to see because Bella has to be indulged.
Yeah, this is a big buildup. The wolves are going to team up with the cold ones. They're, sworn enemies to fight these newborns in Victoria. A massive battle goes down, and we're going to see like one newborn show up because it's got to happen in this little camp with our main characters, even though there's a big old battle going on like 100 feet away.
Yeah, and we'll get to that one newborn she meets, Bree Tanner, not to be confused with, I kept calling her Breonna Taylor, and I'm like, oh, that's
oh no,
not right.
No.
But she will have her own story. We're going to talk about that novella in just a second. But to wrap up this one, so yeah, there's a battle that happens pretty much out of our view. And it seems like it goes down easy because the werewolves and the vampires are working together. Jacob gets hurt. I'm not sure how bad. He heals quick.
Yeah.
So I'm not that worried for him. And, there is Jane and the Volturi that roll in here at the end. I'm not sure. They spent enough time debating whether Victoria was behind everything going on in Seattle for me to wonder if there wasn't a Volturi plot or some bigger vampire behind the redhead.
Yeah, and there is a lot of questioning, like when they kind of figure out what's going on, like why haven't the Volturi showed up to stop these newborns? That's usually their job. Are they in on this? Again, there are seeds of like really interesting plot points that I wish were fleshed out more, but like that's the stuff that's keeping me drawn into this book. But I wish there was a whole lot more of that. But interesting idea, like is the Volturi, is like this a secret plot to get the Colons after that last book?
I sense that there is. I'm not satisfied because we have another big book to go and because Victoria is dead, that it's all said and done.
Yeah, after 3 books, we finally defeated all the bad guys from the first one. It took 1,500 pages to get there.
And get you married and get you bit. That's all that's going to happen. Maybe that is a 700-page argument. I don't know. But before we cover Breaking Dawn, I think we should skip ahead to 2010. 3 years after Stephenie Meyer wrote Eclipse, she came back to the newborn character of Bree Tanner.
The year the theatrical adaptation of this movie came out.
Ah, yes, good point. Maybe as a way of hyping up that. If you read the preface of this novel, it's a short one. It's only 179 pages. But Stephenie Meyer basically says that sometimes you write characters that stay with you, that have a backstory that you want to return to. And she published a story to maybe explain who this child was, this 15-year-old runaway in Seattle who got turned and joined the Victoria Army.
Yeah, this novella, The Short Second Life of Bree Tanner. Stephenie, like this novella, you can get experimental. It doesn't need to be first person, but she's going to do first person again. Like, drives me crazy.
That did make me angry. The only thing I liked about it, I'll just go ahead and put there, besides the fact that it was short and to the point, it kind of covered the same ground. I don't feel like I really learned much about who she was, but it allowed you to understand the perspective of a vampire and how they thirst and how they do have to feel bad about killing people and what have you. This was a character that wasn't vegetarian, that wasn't going out into the woods and eating deer like the Cullens do. And so what is it going to be like for Bella when and if she decides to go vampire? I think that's why it was cited as important. Bella saw a version of herself as an undead, as a cold one, and maybe it gave her pause to think, maybe this is not a great idea.
What's weird for me is when we meet Bree, like she's already a vampire. I get a short second life, so that's referring to her vampire life, but it's not about her getting turned or anything. She's already part of this newborn gang, and I don't know, again, there's interesting things. There's a lot of politics about the leader and that. There are some interesting things, like they are told they can't go out in the sun, like they are being deceived. It does feel like this weird cult that they're in, but I don't know if I have that much more insight into the vampire or the newborn life because of this novella.
No, it's short, so it doesn't overplay its hand, but it does feel like fill in blanks that probably didn't need to be filled.
I did laugh, like early on there was this debate with the vampires, like what superhero would be the best hunter? Would it be Spider-Man? Would it be Hulk? Again, this is coming out in 2010. This is when Twilight is huge at Comic-Con. I do wonder, like, if she started throwing the superhero stuff in there because, yeah, it was now a Comic-Con phenomenon.
Good point. There is sort of a love story happening here as well. It's sort of an Edward and Bella story, I guess. It's she meets a vampire, Diego, who convinces her that they can disobey the people that are manipulating them, that they are going to be safe in the sun. They don't need to believe the vampire myth, that they can have an independent life, and they plan to run away to Canada together, but he is ultimately killed by Victoria. And so if she had only, followed her heart, maybe that's the message, followed her heart and, followed a path to Canada, she wouldn't be murdered as she is by the Volturi at the end of Eclipse and at the end of this novella.
And it is heavily implied, like we talked about with Eclipse, are the Volturi involved with Victoria? She overhears like discussions with the Volturi. Like it heavily implies maybe it's Jane. So deepening that conspiracy theory, I guess, a little bit more. But again, most people have read Breaking Dawn by this point if you're a fan, because this is coming out way after the fact. So I don't know how helpful that is.
Yes. I imagine that there are things that I didn't pick up on because I don't know what happens next, but I will. We will be covering Breaking Dawn, but we're going to wait a week. We're not going to get to part 1 of the movies until 2 weeks from this Friday. So let's go ahead and pick up the book around that same time. And in the meantime, if you can find $10, please join us over on Friday at the silver level to experience the Twilight Saga Eclipse, that movie that became such a big phenomenon and drove book sales. We're going to talk about what this book got turned into when you join us for those 5 movie shows. And so, Jacob, thanks for joining me.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Now Playing Podcast Book Reviews. We hope you've enjoyed this podcast. In the archives at nowplayingpodcast.com, you can find more than 150 more book reviews, including many of the works of Stephen King, the Ian Fleming Bond books, the Planet of the Apes novels, Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns, and many more. Enjoy movies? The Books and Nachos hosts have done more than 1,200 movie reviews, which you can also find at our website, nowplayingpodcast.com. This episode of Now Playing Podcast Book Reviews is copyright 2022, Venganza Media Incorporated, all rights reserved. And no part of this show may be reproduced, repurposed, redistributed, or modified without the express permission of Venganza Media Incorporated.